My name is Serena Blake. I'm 33 years old. On October 11th, 2021, my husband Daniel was airlifted from a construction site on Katy Freeway in Houston with a traumatic brain injury. By 11:30 that night, I was in a hospital gown, 7 weeks early, contractions 4 minutes apart, holding the plastic bag they sent from the trauma unit with Daniel's wallet, his work badge, and his wedding ring inside. At 1:15 a.m., I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. I told her Daniel was in the ICU. I told her I was in labor. I told her I needed someone to come. She paused. I could hear voices in the background, music, glasses. Then she said, "Serena, honey, we are in the middle of Ryan's launch dinner. This really isn't a good time. You're strong. You'll manage." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I said, "Okay, Mom," and I hung up. What my mother didn't seem to remember was that 2 years earlier, I had lain on a surgical table and given my brother Ryan one of my kidneys. I spent 6 weeks recovering. I delayed a promotion. I put my body through something that cannot be undone. I gave Ryan a second chance at life. And the night my husband's brain was bleeding and my daughter was coming 7 weeks too soon, they were at his dinner party, and I was not a good enough reason to leave. 4 years later, when everything in Ryan's life fell apart and my family came back needing me to fix it, I finally understood what Aunt Janet had been trying to tell me for years. I just hadn't been ready to listen. If you have ever given everything to people who decided your crisis could wait, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story genuinely moves you, please subscribe. Now let me take you back, because to understand what that phone call really cost me, you need to understand the life Daniel and I were building, and exactly what I had already given this family before that night ever came. In early 2021, Daniel and I were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cypress, on the northwest edge of Houston, $1,460 a month. It wasn't much to look at, a sand-colored building, a parking lot that flooded every time Houston got serious rain. But inside it was ours, and ours meant something. We had a kitchen with cabinet doors that never quite closed, which drove Daniel quietly insane, and which I found quietly hilarious. We had a second bedroom that was supposed to be a nursery, but still had a treadmill in the corner that neither of us had used in 14 months. We kept saying we would move it. We never moved it. We just accepted it, the way you accept certain things in a life you are building together. Imperfect, comfortable, yours. Daniel was a logistics coordinator for a mid-size construction company called Hargrove Build Group. He left the house every morning at 6:45 in a faded gray jacket that I had tried to replace twice and that he kept retrieving from the donation pile. He remembered things without being asked. He noticed things without being told. He was the kind of man who would quietly move the laundry from the washer to the dryer without mentioning it. Who would notice I hadn't eaten since breakfast and put a plate beside me without making it a conversation? He was steady in all the ways I had always needed someone to be steady, and for a long time I didn't fully understand how rare that was. I worked as a speech-language pathologist at Houston Children's Outpatient Center, a pediatric rehab clinic about 20 minutes from our apartment. I worked with children between 3 and 10, kids who had trouble with language processing, with articulation, with the frustration of having thoughts your mouth cannot yet translate. I loved the work in the quiet, deep way you love things that suit the actual shape of you. I was good at patience. I was good at sitting with someone in the middle of a difficult thing and not rushing them toward the other side of it. I was 32 weeks pregnant. Daniel kept lobbying for Grace. I kept resisting, not because I didn't love the name, but because I wanted something that felt like it belonged to a specific person. We had a list on the refrigerator. We had crossed off 11 names. We had a flat-pack crib still in its box because every time we planned to build it, something else came up. We were going to get to it. We had time. Daniel was the first person in my adult life who looked at how I operated, the way I showed up for everyone, the way I filled every gap, the way I drove to Sugarland on Saturdays to help my mother with her paperwork, the way I answered Ryan's calls at 9 p.m. when he needed to talk through a contract issue and said something about it. We were driving back from a family dinner in Sugarland on a Tuesday in February 2021. Ryan had eaten, talked about his business, and left at 8 without helping clear the table. Daniel had helped clear the table. Daniel always helped clear the table. On the 59 heading back toward Cyprus, he was quiet for a long stretch. Then he said it. "Your family takes more than they give you, Serena. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying I see it, and I don't think you do yet." I changed the subject. I told him he was tired and reading it wrong. I told him Ryan was under pressure. I told him my mother meant well. Daniel didn't push. He just nodded and looked out the window and let me have the version I needed that night. I thought about that Tuesday for years. I still think about it. Now let me tell you about my family. My mother, Carol Whitfield, was 61, lived in Sugarland, 30 minutes south of us, and had remarried 8 years earlier to Gerald, a soft-spoken retired insurance adjuster who tended a vegetable garden and kept largely to himself. My mother was not a cold woman. She was warm in the ways that were easy, the birthday calls, the Facebook comments, the thinking of you texts. She was good at the gestures of love. What she struggled with was the version of love that required inconvenience. She had raised me to be capable and resilient, and somewhere along the way those qualities had become her permission to need less from me than I needed from her. I was strong. I would manage. She had told me so my whole life. Then there was Ryan, my older brother, 38, 5 years ahead of me. He ran a residential development company called Whitfield Property Group, drove a black Range Rover, lived in a 5-bedroom house in Missouri City with his wife Melissa and their son Cooper. On paper, Ryan was everything the family pointed at when they wanted to show the world what they had produced. What Ryan was not was a person who gave things. He received. He received attention, loyalty, the assumption of importance. He received a kidney. He received it from me. In August 2019, Ryan was diagnosed with end-stage kidney disease. He needed a transplant. Gerald was not a match. Carol was not a match. I was. I was the only one. I do not regret donating my kidney to my brother. I made that decision with full information, and I would make it again. Ryan is alive. He has a son who has a father. That matters to me. The donation itself is not the wound. The wound is everything that surrounded it. When I found out I was a match, I told Daniel first. He held my hand and said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." My mother cried with relief when I told her I had agreed. Ryan hugged me and said, "I knew you would." Not "thank you, I knew you would," as if my willingness to give him an organ was simply a characteristic of mine that could be counted on. I filed it away. I didn't know yet how heavy that file would become. The process took 4 months from testing to surgery. I paid $2,300 out of pocket in copays my insurance didn't cover. I told no one. It went on my credit card, and I paid it off quietly over 6 months. The surgery was August 14th, 2019. I was in the operating room for 4 hours. I woke up with a dull ache on my left side that would stay with me for weeks. The fatigue in the first 2 weeks was total, not tiredness, but a fundamental heaviness, a body-wide message that something significant had happened. And I needed help getting up from low chairs for the first 10 days, which I found humiliating because I was not someone who needed help. Daniel took 2 weeks off and managed everything quietly. He never made it feel like a sacrifice. He just showed up every day without commentary. Aunt Janet came on day 3. She drove up from Pearland without calling, appeared at the door with home-cooked meals, lemon ginger tea, and a paperback novel. She sat with me for 4 hours and didn't try to talk about the surgery or the family. She just let me be somewhere other than inside my own head. She came again on day 10 and day 22. Ryan visited once, day 8, 45 minutes, left because Cooper had football practice. My mother visited twice, brought food, cried both times, which required me to comfort her. And I did not find it strange at the time that I spent my surgical recovery comforting the people who had come to comfort me. I had been doing that for so long it had stopped registering. In September 2019, still recovering, I received an email from my supervisor about a senior clinical specialist position I had been building toward for 3 years. The interview required a full week of assessments. I was not ready. I postponed it, citing personal medical circumstances. Nobody in my family connected the postponement to the surgery. It didn't come up. I didn't raise it. 6 months after the transplant, Ryan posted on Instagram. He wrote about his diagnosis, the fear, the surgery, his doctors, Melissa, God, gratitude for second chances. It was genuinely moving. I read it twice. I counted my name. I counted it again. It was not there. And 214 people liked that post. I screenshotted it and saved it. I didn't know why yet. I just knew I needed to be able to find it. At Christmas 2019, Ryan gave a toast. He thanked God, his doctors, Melissa, my mother, his colleagues. Near the end, he looked at me and said, "And Serena, you know what you did for me. I'll never forget it." He sat down. Everyone moved to dessert. I smiled and told myself that was enough. I kept waiting for it to count. That was my family. That was who they were before October 11th, 2021. I need you to hold all of that. The kidney, the recovery, the Instagram post, the Christmas toast, Daniel's words on the 59, because none of it makes sense without it. The phone call from the delivery room doesn't land the way it should unless you understand what I was calling from, what I had already given, what was already spent. October 11th was a Monday. Houston was still running hot, 91 degrees at 5 p.m. I was at work, between sessions, when my phone rang at 4:22. A number I didn't recognize, a site safety officer named Tom from the Hargrove Build Group development on Katy Freeway. He spoke in the measured way of someone trained to deliver bad news. There had been an accident, a scaffolding collapse. Daniel was involved. Unconscious, airlifted to Memorial Hermann. I needed to come now. I do not remember putting down the phone. I remember being in the car park with my keys, the heat like a wall. I drove 22 minutes to Memorial Hermann. I don't remember traffic lights. I remember Daniel's gospel station preset and a woman's voice I couldn't make out over my own breathing. And I remember the automatic doors and Tom in his safety vest near the entrance and the look on his face before he said a word. They took me to a consultation room. Small, clean, box of tissues, a lake print on the wall. The trauma surgeon explained, scaffolding gave way on the 3rd level, Daniel directly below, traumatic brain injury, significant, bleeding on the brain, surgery in progress, 48 hours critical, likely lasting effects, cognitive, possibly physical. They could not tell me yet how much of Daniel would be there when he came out the other side. I sat after the surgeon left and looked at the lake print and thought about the treadmill and the flat-pack crib and Daniel 4 floors up out of reach. Then I felt the first contraction, tighter than the Braxton Hicks I had been having, more deliberate. 7 minutes later, and another. The nurse at the door looked at me for 1 second before her whole bearing shifted, and within 4 minutes I was in a wheelchair moving to labor and delivery. Room 9, 4th floor. Daniel was 4 floors below me and I could not reach him. My daughter was somewhere in my body, not yet ready to arrive. I was in a bed with monitors and an IV, and the particular loneliness of a hospital room at night when you are the only one in it. At 1:15 a.m., between contractions, I called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring. I told her Daniel was in the ICU with a brain injury. I told her I was in labor 7 weeks early on the 4th floor of Memorial Hermann. I told her I needed someone, anyone, to please come. She paused. In the background, voices. A dinner party. Wine glasses. Ryan's property launch dinner. Serena, honey, we're in the middle of Ryan's launch dinner. This really isn't a good time. You're strong. You'll manage. Call us when the baby comes. I said, okay, Mom. I hung up. I didn't call Ryan. I didn't call Gerald. I put the phone face down and looked at the ceiling and felt something go very, very quiet inside me. Not broken. Quiet. The specific quiet of a person who has just confirmed something they already knew but hadn't been ready to face. The quiet of a thing finally settling. 20 minutes later, a nurse came in. Her name was Diane, mid-40s, braids pinned up, a small silver cross catching the light, the calm of someone who has spent years in the worst moments of other people's lives and learned not to flinch. She looked at my face and asked no questions. She checked my monitors, adjusted my IV. Then she pulled a chair close to the bed. Ao sat down and said, I'm not going anywhere tonight. She didn't say I was strong. She didn't say I would manage. She just stayed. Lily Grace Blake was born at 4:19 a.m. on October 12, 2021. 4 pounds, 14 ounces. 7 weeks early. She cried immediately, thin and urgent and indignant, the most specific and beautiful sound I had ever heard. They placed her on my chest for 40 seconds. I counted every second. She had Daniel's nose, the particular straightness of it, sitting at the center of her face like it had decided exactly where it belonged. I knew it immediately, and it went through me like something breaking and something healing at the same time. At 5:30 a.m., a nurse came to tell me Daniel was out of surgery, stable, in the ICU, not yet conscious. And I thanked her and lay in the gray early light of room 9 and thought about the flat-pack crib Daniel had quietly moved to the laundry room 2 weeks ago, planning to build it that weekend. I hadn't known until I walked past and saw it leaning against the wall. Of course he had. He was always doing the next thing before I had thought to ask. Lily spent 16 days in the NICU, 16 days of me moving between 2 floors of the same hospital. Mornings with my hand pressed to the curved wall of Lily's incubator, watching her chest rise and fall. Afternoons in the ICU waiting area outside Daniel's room, talking to him in the low, unhurried voice I used with my smallest patients, not because I was sure he could hear me, but because I had decided to act as if he could. Daniel woke up on day 4, and he opened his eyes, and the first thing he did was find my face. He turned his head, found me, held me there. Then he said, in a voice roughened by the tube, "Hey, just that. Hey." I pressed my forehead to his hand and stayed there for a long time. He knew me. He asked about Lily second. After, "Hey, is she okay?" I said yes. He closed his eyes and something in his shoulders released, but something had changed. I understood it in fragments. He tired within minutes of conversation. Words left him mid-sentence, the sentence stopping somewhere it hadn't meant to, Daniel staring at the space where the word should have been with a frustration that was hard to watch. Loud sounds overwhelmed him. His short-term memory had gaps. He would ask me something, and 20 minutes later ask it again, and I would answer again with the same tone. The same patience, while somewhere behind my ribs a grief I hadn't named yet was moving into the space where my previous life had been. Moderate TB, I with cognitive sequelae. The man I had married was still there. I could see him in the careful way he held my hand, in the dry observations he still managed on good days, in the way he still found my face first in any room. But he was also somewhere slightly behind himself, as if the Daniel I had known had taken a step back and was watching from a short distance. TBI recovery was long, non-linear individual. He would improve. He would also reach ceilings. Nobody could tell me yet where those ceilings were. My family's presence in those 16 days was exactly what I should have expected and exactly what I couldn't fully accept. My mother came on day 6. Casserole, 2 hours. He cried about Daniel's condition, which required me to comfort her. Said I looked exhausted, said I was so strong. Left at 1:05 to beat the traffic. Ryan sent flowers on day 2. Came in person on day 9, 40 minutes. Said you've got this 3 times. Checked his phone once, left with a hug, and call me if you need anything. I watched the lift doors close and thought about the Instagram post with 214 likes and my name not in it. Aunt Janet came on day 1. No call ahead. Just appeared at 6 in the morning with 2 coffees and a bag containing a change of clothes in the right size and a container of scrambled eggs she knew I had loved since childhood. She sat beside me in the NICU waiting area and said, "You don't have to perform anything for me. I know what this is." She came back on day 4, day 8, day 13. Every time she brought something useful and asked one real question and let the silence be whatever it needed to be. Lily came home on day 17. Daniel went to inpatient rehab 2 days later. I drove between the rehab facility and home and the clinic where I had returned to part-time work because I needed the income and I needed something still recognizably my life. 4 to 6 hours of sleep. No complaint. Because there was no one else, and Lily needed feeding and Daniel needed visiting, and life continued to require maintenance regardless of what was happening inside it. Daniel came home in December 2021. He could not return to Hargrove. Fast decisions in noisy environments now overwhelmed him, and he tried briefly in early 2022, and came home from 3 weeks of it diminished in a way I couldn't watch without it costing me something. He stopped. We reconfigured, lighter administrative work from home, a fraction of his previous salary. I became the primary earner, quietly, without drama, without making him feel the weight of it any more than he already did. I started therapy with Dr. Paula Reed in January 2022. In our 5th session, she asked when I had last let someone actually take care of me, not bring food or say I was strong, but sit inside the difficult thing with me. I opened my mouth, said, "Daniel used to, before the accident, and Aunt Janet." Dr. Reed said, "Not your mother? Not Ryan?" I looked at the window. No. She let that sit. It sat in me for a long time after I left. In March 2023, I took the senior clinical specialist position, the role I had delayed for Ryan's surgery. Dr. Keating told me I should have been in it 2 years earlier. I smiled and said nothing. Lily turned 1, then 2, then 3, and deeply committed to a stuffed elephant named Gerald. Daniel had good stretches and harder ones. I didn't hold the good stretches too tightly. I had learned that hope was most useful when it was flexible. But I let myself be grateful. I was grateful for a great deal. I was also, somewhere quiet, still carrying the phone call from room 9. Not loudly, more the way you carry something you haven't yet figured out what to do with. The 1:15 a.m. text, the Instagram post, The 40-minute visit on day 9. At the flowers and the gone-by one, and the way nobody had asked in 2 years how I was doing in the way that actually wanted to know. I had screenshots, records. I kept them not out of intention, but instinct. The instinct of a person who had been called too sensitive and too dramatic for too long and had developed the habit of keeping evidence. I didn't know yet that I would need it. I just wasn't ready to throw it away. January 2025 arrived the way difficult things often do. Unremarkably, inside an ordinary week. Uncle Raymond called first, on a Sunday afternoon. He was my mother's older brother, a retired contractor from Pearland, a man who didn't perform emotions he wasn't feeling. He told me Ryan's development financing had collapsed. 2 active projects overextended. Ryan had been having an affair. Melissa had filed for divorce. So Ryan had moved back into Carol's house. Raymond said, "I just want you to have the information. What you do with it is your business." He asked how Daniel was. He asked about Lily. He was the only person in my extended family who asked about both without being reminded they existed. The messages from my family started the following week and multiplied through February. Carol calling Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Ryan is really struggling. He needs his family. You always know what to say. Ryan texting Tuesday, first contact in 4 months. Hey, going through it, could really use my sister. No mention of Daniel. No mention of Lily. No mention of the dinner or the hospital or the kidney or any of the years I had operated as his backdrop. As if I were simply a resource that had been left unused and was now being needed again. Gerald leaving a voicemail that was brief and uncomfortable and clearly prompted. In 4 weeks, 9 calls, 11 texts, 2 voicemails. Ryan's name in every one. Lily's name twice. Both times attached to Ryan's name like an afterthought. Daniel's name not once. Would you have gone back? Tell me in the comments. I talked to Dr. Reed. What do you want from this? I thought past the first answer into the actual one. I want them to see what I have been holding. Not so they feel terrible, so I can put it down in front of them and walk away without it. I am tired of carrying it alone, she asked, and if Ryan cannot receive it, then I will know that too. Knowing is better than wondering. Wondering is what's keeping it heavy. I called Aunt Janet. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I have been waiting a long time for you to do this, baby." I said, "I know. That's why you're the one I called first." I prepared over the following week. I printed the surgical consent form from August 14th, 2019, the post-operative care records, the out-of-pocket receipts, $2,300, the payslip showing 2 weeks of unpaid leave, the email to Dr. Keating requesting postponement of the senior interview, September 2019, personal medical circumstances, the Instagram post, 214 likes, my name absent. The text from my mother at 1:15 a.m. We're in the middle of Ryan's launch dinner. This really isn't a good time. You're strong. You'll manage. A photograph of Lily in her NICU incubator at 5 in the morning the day she was born. 4 pounds, 14 ounces. No one else in the frame. I chose the Roasted Fig, a quiet cafe in Missouri City, midway between my house and Sugarland. Sunday, February 9th, 2025, 10:30 in the morning. The night before, Daniel found me standing at the kitchen counter looking at the folder. He said, "You ready?" I said, "I think I've been ready for 4 years." He put his hand on the back of my neck, the gesture unchanged, one of the things the accident had not taken. "You know what you're doing," he said. Not a question. An acknowledgement. The morning of February 9th, Lily was still asleep when I left. I stood in her doorway and watched her breathe, one arm thrown out, the stuffed elephant Gerald tucked under her chin. I thought about Daniel's words from the 59 in February 2021. Your family takes more than they give you. I see it, and I don't think you do yet. I thought he would be glad to see this morning. They were already there when I arrived. Carol by the window in a cream cardigan. Ryan across from her, thinner, the room-filling confidence reduced to something quieter. A man whose story about himself had recently run out of road. I sat. I ordered coffee. I let the silence breathe before Carol began. We're so glad you came. Ryan really needs. I raised one hand, gently. Mom, let me go first. I opened the folder. I spoke the way I spoke to families of my patients, directly, without hurry, with the steadiness of someone who has already resolved the argument and is now simply reporting the outcome. August 14th, 2019. I donated my left kidney to Ryan. That is permanent. My body will never be exactly what it was. I will monitor my kidney function every year for the rest of my life. And I carry that decision in my body every single day. I don't regret it. I need you to hear that. I would do it again. That is not what I'm here to talk about. I placed the receipts, the payslip, the email. I paid $2,300 out of pocket for pre-surgical testing. I lost $3,800 in unpaid income. I postponed a senior position interview I had worked toward for 3 years because I was still recovering. I did all of this without telling anyone how hard it actually was. I didn't want Ryan to carry the weight of it. I looked at Ryan. I was protecting you. Even then. Ryan was very still. I placed the Instagram screenshot. This is what you posted 6 months after the transplant. 214 likes. You thanked God, your doctors, Melissa, your company. Well, you wrote about gratitude and second chances. You did not include my name. I'm not saying you did it to hurt me. I'm saying it didn't cross your mind. And that is what I need you to understand. I placed Carol's text from the night of October 12th, 1:15 in the morning. Daniel in surgery with a brain injury he will carry the rest of his life. My daughter 7 weeks early, 4 pounds 14 ounces, and I was on the 4th floor of Memorial Hermann, and I called you. Carol was reading it, her face going through several things. You were at Ryan's dinner. I'm not saying the dinner didn't matter. I'm saying when I called from that room, I was not an emergency. And Mom, I waited until she looked up. That was not the first time. It was just the first time you said it out loud. I placed the photograph of Lily in the incubator. Nobody spoke. The coffee machine cycled. Someone at another table laughed at something. I am not here to punish anyone. I'm not here to end things. I'm here because I have been carrying this for 4 years, and I am done carrying it alone. This is what I gave this family. This is what it cost. And this, I touched the text screenshot, is what I needed that you did not give. I needed you to come. I needed to not be alone in that room. And I was alone because Ryan's dinner couldn't wait, and I was strong and I would manage. I folded my hands on the table. I managed. I always manage. But I need you to see what that word has always cost me. Carol was crying, silent tears, the real kind. Ryan had not looked away from the photograph of Lily since I placed it down. He spoke first, his voice stripped of its usual ease. The Instagram post, he said slowly. I looked at it after you said. I looked at it again last week. You're right. I thanked everyone. And you were on a table. You were on a table and I put you in a sentence at Christmas, and then I didn't put you anywhere. I don't have a reason. It didn't occur to me. And you're right that that's the point. You saved my life, and it didn't occur to me to say your name where people could hear it. He paused. I'm sorry. Not sorry it happened this way. I'm sorry I did it. I looked at him for a long moment. That means something, Ryan. It doesn't undo it, but it means something that you can say it. Carol reached toward my hand. I didn't think you needed us. You never asked. You always handled everything. I thought you were fine. I left her hand where it was, reaching, and looked at her steadily. You taught me not to ask, Mom. Well, from when I was small, you told me I was strong, I would manage, and you believed it so completely that when I called at 1 a.m. from a delivery room and told you I needed someone, you heard strong and manage and you stayed at the dinner. I needed you to surprise me that night, and you didn't. I needed to say that to you in person. Now I have. I closed the folder. I left it on the table. I stood, picked up my bag, looked at them both. I hope things get easier for you, Ryan. I mean that. But I am not the answer to a crisis for people who decided my crisis wasn't worth leaving dinner for. Keep this. I don't need it anymore. I walked out. I sat in the car for 5 minutes before starting the engine, hands on the steering wheel. A slight tremor, not anger, not grief, something else. At the physical sensation of having set something down after a very long time. Release, but also the muscle memory of the weight. The body still expecting a load that is no longer there. I texted Aunt Janet, done. She replied in under a minute, I'm home. Come whenever you're ready. I made soup. I started the engine. I drove to Pearland. The weeks that followed were not dramatic. Real change rarely is. Carol's letter arrived 9 days later, 3 handwritten pages. Better than I expected, not quite enough. Explanations where accountings would have served better. I'm sorry you felt instead of I'm sorry I did. I read it twice, put it in a drawer, sat with it for 3 weeks, then called. Not to reconcile. To say, I got your letter, I read it, I need more time, but I want you to know I read it. Carol said, okay. The most honest 2 words she had ever said to me. Ryan called 6 weeks after the roasted fig. He didn't ask for anything. He said, I went back and looked at that post. I looked at it for a long time. You're right. You saved my life and I didn't say your name. I don't have an excuse. I just didn't think. And I've been not thinking about what things cost you for a very long time. I didn't know. But I should have asked. I should have been paying attention to my own sister the way she was paying attention to everyone else. And then, I'm sorry, Serena. Not sorry you feel that way. Actually sorry. I know I can't give you your kidney back. I can't go back to October 2021. But I need you to know I finally understand what I received. The real thing, when it finally came, had a different texture than I had imagined. Quieter, less resolved, more human. He was not declaring himself changed. He was not asking for absolution. He was just saying, I see it now. I needed you to know. That means something, Ryan. It doesn't fix everything, but it's the right place to start. We talked for 25 minutes. Not the easy talk of people who have never had to reckon with anything, but the careful conversation of 2 people learning the actual shape of each other for the first time. I did not offer more than I had. I did not close the door. Trust was not a switch. It was a bridge, and I would test each plank before I put my weight on it. Aunt Janet drove up from Pearland on alternate weekends through winter and into spring. Lily called her Grandjean, which started as an accident and became a title. Exactly what Janet had earned. That July, Serena held a cookout in the backyard. Daniel grilled, wrong about the chicken, right about the corn, and refused to share the seasoning. Lily ran between everyone's legs, causing maximum disruption. Janet sat in the good chair and accepted Lily onto her lap and could not remove her for the rest of the afternoon. Trish from the hospital brought a lemon blueberry dessert nobody had asked for that turned out to be the best thing anyone had eaten in recent memory. Marcus, Daniel's occupational therapist turned genuine friend. He brought his wife and stayed until the light went. At some point in the late afternoon, Daniel looked across the yard at me. I was laughing about something with Trish, and he was at the grill watching. I caught his eye. He mouthed, "You okay?" I looked at the people around me. The aunt who came before being asked, the friend who showed up with 2 coffees and the right size clothes at 6 in the morning in the worst 16 days of my life, the colleague who asked how I was actually doing and meant the actually, the therapist who became a friend, and my husband finding my face across a backyard the way he had always found my face, the way the accident had not taken, and that I had learned to hold as the specific and irreplaceable thing it was. I mouthed back, "Yeah, I really am," and I was. Not in the easy way of someone for whom nothing has cost anything. In the harder, more durable way of someone who has looked clearly at what things cost and decided, with full information, what was worth keeping and what could finally be put down. My name is Serena Blake. I'm 33 years old. I'm a speech-language pathologist, a wife to a man I am still learning how to love in new ways, and a mother to the most headstrong 4-year-old who has ever refused to get off her great-aunt's lap and who runs into fountains fully clothed without a second of hesitation. I used to think love was something you proved, that if you gave enough, your time, your energy, your body, your silence, eventually the people you gave it to would understand what you were worth. I thought sacrifice translated itself. It doesn't. Oh, some people will receive what you give and assume there is more where it came from. Not because they are monsters, because you trained them to. Because every time you managed without asking, every time you showed up without being summoned, every time you said, "I'm fine" when you weren't, you taught them that your needs were optional, that your emergencies could wait, that you were strong, you would manage. I gave my brother one of my kidneys. I lay on a table and gave him a second chance at life, and he posted about it without my name in it, and I smiled at Christmas and told myself it was enough. It was not enough. The love that doesn't say your name where people can hear it is not the love you need. The love that stays at the dinner was never going to come to the hospital. Oh, I had to see that clearly before I could stop giving to it and expecting something different back. Real love shows up before it's comfortable. It arrives without being asked, with the right size clothes and 2 coffees at 6 in the morning. It sits beside you in a hospital room and says, "I'm not going anywhere," and means it. It asks how you are actually doing and waits through the silence for the actual answer. It does not call you strong as a reason not to help. It pulls up a chair and stays. If you are watching this, and you have been the person who carries things quietly, who gives and covers and shows up and sacrifices and never sends a bill, who has given pieces of yourself that cannot be returned, who has sat in the worst night of your life and heard it's not a good time, I see you. I know what that costs. You are allowed to put it down, not in anger, not in bitterness, in honesty. You are allowed to place it on a table in front of the people who should have been carrying it with you and say, "This is what I gave. This is what it cost. This is what I needed that you did not give." And then you are allowed to walk out and drive to the person who always came before being asked and let them feed you soup and feel, for the first time in a very long time, like someone who does not have to perform anything to deserve being there. Setting that boundary is not cruelty. It is not abandonment. It is the first fully honest thing you will have done for yourself in years. And on the other side of it is not emptiness. On the other side of it is the family you didn't know you were already building in hospital corridors and car parks and backyards. At the people who showed up without a reason except that they saw you and they stayed. That is the family I have, and it is more than enough. If this story reminded you of your own, leave a comment. Not for me. For the next person who needs to know they are not too sensitive, not too dramatic, not too much. They are just, finally, telling the truth. And if someone in your life showed up the way Aunt Janet showed up for me, tell me about them. Those people deserve to be named. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Tell me where you're watching from. And if someone needs to hear this today, send it to them. Thank you for listening.